The heavyweight champion of the world ordered a cup of coffee. Black. No sugar. The waitress, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 19, who had probably grown up hearing her father talk about this man the way people talk about weather or war, like something bigger than themselves, wrote it down on her little pad without looking up, and then she looked up and her pen stopped moving. Ali smiled at her. Not the big smile. Not the one the cameras got. Not the one he wore before a fight when he was performing for the whole world. This was the other one. The one his mother recognized. Small. Almost private. The kind of smile that says, I know exactly where I am, and I am exactly where I mean to be. She didn't speak. Nobody in the diner spoke. There were 11 people in that room when Muhammad Ali walked through the door, and the moment he crossed the threshold, every single one of them stopped whatever they were doing. Forks halfway to mouths, conversations dangling mid-sentence, a man by the window frozen with his newspaper half-folded. And the silence that fell was not the silence of hostility. It was something rarer than that. It was the silence of people who suddenly understood that they were standing inside a moment that would outlast them. Ali didn't perform for any of it. He walked to the counter, pulled out a stool, deliberately unhurried, and sat down the way a man sits when he has nowhere else to be and has already won every argument he'll ever need to win. He placed both hands flat on the formica surface, looked straight ahead at the coffee maker behind the counter, and waited. That was 1975. But to understand what happened in that diner, you have to go back 15 years. You have to go back to a boy. The boy's name was Cassius Marcellus Clay, and in the summer of 1960 he came home from Rome with a gold medal hanging around his neck, and the whole world, it seemed, ready to open itself up to him. He was 18 years old. He had defeated every amateur fighter they put in front of him. He had shaken hands with heads of state. He had stood on a podium while his country's anthem played and felt something so large move through his chest that he didn't have the words for it yet. He was still assembling the vocabulary of who he was going to be. He came home to Louisville on a Tuesday. By Thursday, he was hungry. The diner was on a corner 2 blocks from his neighborhood, a narrow, low-ceilinged place with a Coca-Cola sign in the window and 4 stools at the counter and 7 booths along the wall. It smelled like bacon grease and black pepper and the particular sweetness of pie cooling on a rack somewhere in the back. He had walked past it 100 times. He had looked through the window at the people eating inside and thought about what he would order when he finally went in. He went in on a Thursday afternoon in August, gold medal around his neck, and a man came around the counter before he could reach a stool. The man wasn't angry. That was the part that stayed with Cassius longest. Not the words, not the gesture, but the complete and total absence of anger in the man's face. He looked at the boy the way you look at a door that opens the wrong way. An inconvenience. A mechanical problem to be corrected. We don't serve your kind here, the man said. 4 words. No raised voice. No apology either. Cassius Clay stood there for a moment with the Olympic gold medal of the United States of America hanging from his neck and understood something about his country that no ceremony, no handshake, no anthem had prepared him for. He left without speaking. He walked down to the Ohio River that evening and stood on the bridge for a long time, looking at the water, turning the medal over in his hands. Some accounts say he threw it in. He would tell the story differently depending on who was asking. But everyone who knew him in those years agrees on one thing. The boy who left Louisville for Rome and the boy who came back were not quite the same person. And the boy who walked away from that diner on that Thursday afternoon in August was someone different still. Something had been decided that he just didn't know yet what he was going to do with it. What he did with it was become the most famous athlete on the planet. He did it loudly, deliberately, with a kind of theatrical genius that made people think he was performing when in fact he was always serious. He talked because silence had been forced on him, and he had decided, with the full weight of his will, that he would never be silenced again. He was beautiful and he knew it. He was fast and he proved it. He walked into every room on earth like he had built it himself, and people either loved him ferociously or hated him with equal conviction, and he accepted both as evidence that he was doing something real. He became Muhammad Ali. He refused the draft and lost 3 years of his career at his absolute peak. 3 years the government took from him because he would not go to Vietnam and kill men he had no quarrel with. He said so in plain language. He paid for it in plain consequences. His title stripped. His license revoked. His passport taken. A federal conviction hanging over him while the case worked its way to the Supreme Court. He did not bend. He did not disappear. He trained in gyms that would have him, fought exhibition bouts where he could, gave speeches on college campuses, and somewhere in all of it he became something larger than a boxer. He became a living argument, A walking proof that a man could stand in the center of the most powerful country on earth and say no clearly and without apology, and survive it. The Supreme Court overturned his conviction in 1971. He came back and fought Joe Frazier and lost. He fought him again and won. He went to Zaire and knocked out George Foreman in the 8th round in a fight that nobody on earth believed he could win, and he won it by doing something that looked, from the outside, like surrender. Leaning on the ropes, covering up, absorbing punishment that should have ended him, until Foreman punched himself out and Ali rose from those ropes like something that had decided it wasn't finished yet. He came back from Zaire as something close to a myth. And a few months later, on a Tuesday morning in the spring of 1975, he got into a car alone and drove to Georgia. The owner came out from the kitchen wiping his hands on a dish towel. He was 61 years old. His name was Harold. He had owned the diner for 32 years, inherited it from his father, who had inherited it from his father before that. 3 generations of the same Formica countertop, the same cracked vinyl on stool number 3, the same pie rack in the back that he had never once thought to replace because his customers didn't come for novelty. They came for sameness. They came because some things Harold had always believed were better left unchanged. He had taken down the sign 8 years ago. Not because someone made him. Not because of a law, not because of a protest, not because anyone had come and demanded it. He had taken it down on a Sunday morning before anyone else arrived, standing on a step stool with a screwdriver, and he had carried the sign to the back and put it in a cardboard box and put the box under a shelf in the storage room and never looked at it again. He had never told anyone why. He stepped through the kitchen door and saw Muhammad Ali sitting at his counter drinking coffee, and Harold stopped walking. They looked at each other. Ali set his cup down slowly. He didn't stand up. He didn't extend a hand. He just looked at the man the way you look at someone when you want them to understand that you have not come to fight. "You remember me?" Ali said that it was not a question. Harold's jaw moved once, like he was testing whether words were available to him. "I remember you," he said. "Good," Ali said. "Sit down." And Harold, who had not been told what to do in his own establishment in 32 years, pulled out a stool and sat down. They talked for 2 hours. Later, Harold would try to explain this to his wife, to his son, to the few close friends he eventually told the story to, and he would always fail at the same point. The point where he tried to explain why he sat down. Why he didn't ask Ali to leave, why he didn't stand on ceremony or pride or the 32 years of ownership that should have given him the authority to control what happened in his own building. He couldn't explain it. He would say, eventually, that it had something to do with the way Ali looked at him. Not with hatred, which Harold could have resisted, and not with pity, which would have been worse. He looked at him the way a man looks at another man when he has decided to treat him as his full equal despite every reason not to. And the generosity of it was so unexpected and so complete that Harold simply had no defense against it. Ali talked about Louisville. He talked about Rome. He talked about coming home with the medal and walking into a place not unlike this one and being turned away by a man not unlike Harold. And he described it without drama, the way you describe weather, factually, precisely, without asking for anything in return. And Harold sat and listened and felt something move through him that he did not have a name for. It was not guilt exactly, though guilt was part of it. It was something older and heavier, something that had been sitting in his chest for years without his full acknowledgement, and Ali was simply naming it out loud, calmly, the way a doctor reads a chart. That he talked about the 3 years the government took from him. He talked about what it cost him. Not the money, not the titles, but the time, the irreplaceable time that a fighter's body is given and cannot get back. He talked about his children. He talked about his faith. He ordered a piece of pie, cherry, and ate it slowly and said it was the best pie he'd had in a long time, and meant it. Harold refilled his coffee twice. When Ali finally stood up, he stretched the way fighters stretch, from the spine, hands high, unhurried, and he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a fold of bills and set them on the counter. Harold looked at the money. His face changed. "I can't take that," he said. "It's not for the coffee," Ali said. Harold looked up. "I know," Harold said quietly. Ali put on his jacket. He picked up the fold of bills and he pressed them into Harold's hand. Not placing them on the counter, not leaving them to be found, but putting them directly into the man's hand and closing Harold's fingers around them. And he held Harold's hand for just a moment, the way you hold something you want to make sure the other person feels. "That's for the man you used to be," Ali said. "I'm giving it to the man you are now." He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the glass. The same door, the same weight, the same slight resistance, and he turned back once. Harold was still standing at the counter with the money in his closed fist and his eyes doing something that a 61-year-old man in Georgia in 1975 would not have called crying. Ali looked at him for a long moment. "You took the sign down," he said. Harold nodded. "That's all I needed to know," Ali said. And he walked out into the afternoon, into the light, into the noise of an ordinary Tuesday, and got into his car and drove away, and Harold stood at his counter for a very long time after the car disappeared, holding the money, not moving, while the coffee maker hissed quietly behind him and the pie cooled on the rack in the back, and 11 people in a diner in Georgia tried to decide how to go back to being ordinary after witnessing something they understood in their bones was not. Harold never spent the money. He kept it in the same cardboard box as the sign he had taken down 8 years earlier on a Sunday morning, for reasons he had never fully explained to anyone. He kept both things in the storage room under the shelf together because it seemed right to him that they should be near each other. The thing he was ashamed of and the thing he had been given in spite of it. He told his son the story the year before he died. His son told it at the funeral, and the room, full of people who had known Harold their whole lives, sat in a silence that was not grief exactly, or not only grief, but something that happens when a story arrives late and lands exactly where it was always meant to go. Muhammad Ali died on June 3, 2016. Harold's son drove 6 hours to stand outside the Memorial Inn, Louisville. He didn't go in. He just stood on the sidewalk outside in the June heat with his hands in his pockets, the way you stand near something you want to be close to without claiming any part off it for yourself. He stood there for an hour. Then he drove home. The greatest fighters in history are remembered for what they did inside the ropes. The combinations, the knockouts, the rounds they survived when they should have fallen. But Muhammad Ali's most devastating blow was never thrown in a ring. It was thrown on a Tuesday morning in a diner in Georgia, with a cup of black coffee and 2 hours of honest conversation and a fold of bills pressed into a man's hand with the words, "I'm giving it to the man you are now." No ref counted to 10 and no crowd screamed. But something went down that day that never got back up. And that, in the end, is what separates the fighters from the legends. The fighters beat you. The legends change you.